Our meat. The strong eat.
What's up, guys? Thanks for coming back. So, looks like we are halfway through this season of The Terror, and the episode is titled, let me look at it here, Shattered Like a Pearl. And this is probably one of the most depressing episodes so far this season, just with all the consequences that have happened to all our characters, and especially with how the last episode ended with losing the children. And it only made me wonder what would happen to her character, not only losing her children, but finding out other news in this episode and knowing that her and Chester are separated at the moment. But there seems to be a common theme in regards to loss. Luz loses her children. Chester seems to be losing himself in regards to him being at war and him kind of having all these hallucinations and just really questioning everything that's happening. And then you have the Japanese Americans at the camps and their identities being questioned from the American soldiers. They're having to answer all these questions on these questionnaires, and if they don't answer them properly, they could be seen as an enemy and brought back to Japan. Or if they say they will side with the Americans, they will fight in the war. So it seems that they don't really have their own choice to make for themselves. And it's kind of a interesting theme that they're doing in this episode, because we do see a bit of the horror elements that are going on here, but it's more so the terror of kind of someone stealing who you are as a person, or having someone taken away from you that you have cherished and loved. But a big chunk of this episode is really from Chester and Luz. That's what's really going on with these two characters, because we have seen a really big shift in regards to how they are and how we've seen them since the beginning of this show. And Luz is honestly the most interesting one of this episode alone, and what she's going through after she has lost her children. And I've said this before, when the show first premiered, she was a character I wouldn't think I would like as much, and she wasn't really convincing as being Chester's love interest. But now I'm really seeing the talent she has, and her character I've really grown fond of. And she is going through a pit of despair right now because she just lost 2 babies. Chester's not there, and she feels alone. And this is actually the first time we get to see Luz's father, that shows up later on, but then he has more bad news for her. Her father's come to tell her that she had lost her brother, so now she lost a brother, her children, and she is not by Chester's side. So it's not the brightest of days for her. But I do have to say, in regards to her scenes, I thought with the first time we see her by the lake and the kids, they are kind of like spying on her, and they're kind of calling her, I think, the ghost woman. Just, it was such a beautifully shot moment, considering it's such a depressing one. And I think that's one of the best shots you could ever do, best sequences in anything, in a movie or a TV show, when you get something that's so grim and just so dark in regards to the material of what's going on, but just make it such a beautiful moment. It's special. And she's there in a white dress, looks like it's a white gown, and everything else is a gray. You see fog everywhere, but just the way it's all happening, it's also spooky in a way. It reminded me of a movie that came out a few months ago, The Curse of La Llorona, and all the shots there and all those moments had the same likeness to it. But I really just enjoyed how that whole scene was created. But it is unfortunate, though, what happens to Luz. As we see towards the end, she's taken by her father, she leaves. So the future between her and Chester is kind of up in the air. I don't know what's going to happen. And being that we're halfway through this season, I don't know if we'll see her again. I don't know if she'll see Chester again. So it's quite of a mystery. And then with Chester is also very interesting. He is still with the soldiers, helping to, break the codes. He meets a Japanese prisoner who claims he's possessed, and Chester later finds out that he's lying, which I thought was very smart of him to take a picture of the guy to prove that he was lying. And it's very fascinating with these two characters, because one's a Japanese American fighting for the Americans. He's fighting with them to break the codes. The other guy is Japanese, fighting against them, and the two become friends eventually. And this guy eventually tells Chester what he really has been doing, why he's been pretending that he's possessed, because of how the white American soldiers, how they've been torturing the Japanese. So that's why he's putting up this farce, and they're exchanging stories about baseball. And it seems, a very tender moment between two individuals. And then later on, he's been called to be taken away for interrogation somewhere else. And that's the point where Chester gives him the opportunity to give him an honorary death by killing himself. And it was, also another kind of gory moment. And once again, I said this before, in the show, it's very surprising to see this type of stuff on TV, but it was appropriate for what he was doing because he was escaping probably something that would be far worse than what he was actually doing to himself. But what follows after this sequence and before it, you have the Yurei taking the forms of different soldiers and even taking possession over the guy that Chester's working with and breaking the codes. The episode begins with a soldier that is possessed, and he's holding a bag that's bleeding out. You come to find out that's the remains of Yoko after the Jeep had crashed, in which Chester and that other guy that has now been possessed taking Chester hostage. And the bag opens and it comes out and Yoko just standing there, and it ends on a cliffhanger. And it seems that almost every episode has done that, and this one is one where I'm just really wondering what's going to happen to Chester in the next coming episodes, and if he'll ever make it back to the camps. But if it isn't Luz or Chester that's the issue, it's also the fact that at the camps they're facing this segregation done by the Americans, pretty much telling them these questionnaires, you're either on their side or you're not, and if you're not, it's considered treason and you're sent back to where you came from. And this is causing a rift amongst the community of the Japanese Americans, where some are willing to say, yes, we are on your side, we will do whatever you want. Then the other side is saying, no, I won't stand for that. I'm not going to lose myself in order to comply with these Americans. One good example is between Amy, the secretary that we've seen before, and her boyfriend Ken. Amy is the type that will comply with the Americans. Ken, on the other hand, is on the other side. He will not stand for it. He will not bow down to any of their requests. And we see that in the questionnaire where he does put no for most of the answers, but later on we see Amy changes those answers, but then we see the consequences of her doing that. Anyone that has complied with these Americans, they are now all sent off to war, Ken being one of them. So now it doesn't look good for Amy because everyone else in the community now knows what she has done. But this is, once again, just a perfect example of one's identity and how far you're willing to go in order to protect it. Ken was one of those people. He would do whatever it takes in order to protect the person that he is. Otherwise, with Amy, she's the type that says just do whatever they want us to do in order for us not to be sent back to Japan. But I think that's the real horror that they are facing, and probably what a lot of other people face, in knowing your true identity and how much you're really supposed to protect it from other people, no matter what challenges may come in your way. And in this case, for the Japanese Americans, they have to make a choice. But this was a pretty good episode, not as good as the last few. And this one really had a lot of heart in it, and it was a lot of meaning, a lot of interesting themes. And it is really taking us in the next direction of where the next few episodes are going to go. And even though it wasn't a lot of the horror aspect, it did, like I said, show a lot of the terror that practically what people face. But as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Leave those comments below and tell me what you thought about this week's episode. I'll be back next week to review episode 6, and between that, hopefully a few movie reviews. And also coming up next Wednesday, we have the premiere of season 9 of American Horror Story 1984. Really looking forward to that, so I'll be reviewing that show as well. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to hear more from me regarding movies and more, where anything's possible.